All right, so you guys wanted a deep dive on this one, and let me tell you, this book is a doozy. Tellinger's Ubuntu Contributionism.
Yeah, it's
Really something else.
definitely out there.
We're talking about a whole new way of life, like no money, radical communities, some pretty far out stuff.
Yeah, and you mentioned being interested in different economic models, and this one is about as alternative as it gets.
Oh yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. He doesn't just critique capitalism like a lot of thinkers do. He goes way beyond that. He's like, let's scrap the whole system and start over.
Exactly. He's proposing a complete societal overhaul.
So where do we even begin with this?
Well, I think the best place to start is with Tellinger's central argument. Money is the root of all evil.
Whoa, okay, strong statement.
Right, but he doesn't stop there. He traces this idea all the way back to ancient priest kings.
Wait, hold on. Ancient priest kings, like way back in the day.
Oh yeah, we're talking ancient Sumeria, Babylon, the whole shebang.
So he's saying that the whole money equals power thing has been going on for thousands of years.
That's exactly his point. And he's got some pretty interesting evidence to back it up. He points to these ancient Sumerian clay tablets that actually record financial transactions.
Wow, clay tablets. That's like the original bookkeeping.
I know, right? It's mind-blowing to think about. But those records suggest that even back then, rulers were using money as a way to control their subjects. And then there's the Babylonian kings list.
Okay, I'm not familiar with that one. What's that all about?
It's basically a chronological list of kings from ancient Babylonia. And here's the kicker. It suggests that these early rulers were appointed by gods.
Hold up, gods with quotation marks. That sounds a little, out there.
Yeah, that's where Tellinger starts to blend historical analysis with some more speculative ideas.
So we should probably take that part with a grain of salt.
Probably.
Yeah.
But the main takeaway here is that Tellinger believes money has always been a tool for control and that this power dynamic has persisted throughout history.
Okay, so we've got ancient priest kings controlling people with money. But how does that connect to the modern world? How does that system of control play out today?
Well, that's where Tellinger gets even more controversial.
Oh boy.
He argues that the same forces that controlled ancient societies are still in control today, just in a more sophisticated way.
And who are these forces exactly?
He points to a global elite, a network of powerful individuals and families who manipulate governments and economies for their own benefit.
Okay, I'm starting to see where this is going. So it's like a giant conspiracy theory.
You could say that he gets into some pretty deep conspiracy theories about secret societies, hidden agendas, the whole 9 yards.
That's a lot to unpack, but before we get too deep into those theories, let's stick with his main argument for a sec. He also claims that countries are basically corporations, right? That they're beholden to this financial elite.
Yeah, that's a key part of his argument. He uses some interesting examples to make his case, like the fact that many countries are listed on stock exchanges.
Wait a minute, countries on the stock exchange? Isn't that just for companies?
That's what most people think. But Tellinger points out that these listings do exist and that they represent a certain level of financial entanglement between countries and global markets.
Okay, that's interesting. He also goes on and on about the use of capital letters in official documents like it's some kind of secret code.
Right. He sees that as another piece of evidence that countries are operating as corporations.
Okay, so let's say for argument's sake that we entertain this idea that countries are essentially corporations controlled by some shadowy elite. Where do we fit into all of this? How does this impact everyday people like us?
Well, according to Tellinger, we're born into this system of control from the very beginning. He points to birth certificates as turning individuals into what he calls juristic persons.
Juristic persons. That sounds intense. What does that even mean?
In simple terms, a juristic person is a legal entity that can have rights and responsibilities. Tillinger's point is that the state lays claim to us from birth through these legal documents, essentially treating us as corporate property.
So he's saying we don't really own ourselves, that we're owned by the system.
That's the gist of it, yeah. He believes that our perceived freedoms are largely illusory and that we're born into a system designed to benefit the elite.
That's a pretty bleak outlook.
It is. And he doesn't stop there. He goes on to list a whole series of what he calls stolen rights, things that should belong to the people but have been claimed by governments and corporations.
Like what? Give me some examples.
He talks about ownership of land, water, minerals, even the airwaves. He believes all of these things should be shared resources, but instead, they've been monopolized by those in power.
So basically he's saying that the whole system is rigged against us from the get-go.
That's how he sees it.
So we're born into this system of control. We don't own our own rights. We're basically pawns in some grand game run by a shadowy elite. It's all very matrixy when you put it that way.
I know, it's a lot to take in. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. We haven't even gotten into his proposed solutions yet.
Which is where things get really interesting, right? Because if Tellinger is spending all this time pointing out the problems, he must have some ideas about how to fix them.
Oh, he definitely does. And that's where this whole Ubuntu Contributionism thing comes in.
Right, bring on the solutions, because honestly, I could use a little hope after all that doom and gloom.
I hear ya. Let's dive into Tellinger's radical alternative. So Ubuntu Contributionism, it's like this whole other reality, you know? Like, imagine a world where money doesn't exist, everyone shares resources, and people contribute their skills just because they want to, you know, for the good of all.
That sounds amazing, but also kind of impossible. Like, how would that even work in the real world?
Well, it's based on this philosophy called Ubuntu. It's all about interconnectedness and community. Like, we're all in this together, you know?
Okay, I get that.
Yeah.
But practically speaking, how do you run a society without any money? Who makes decisions? Who organizes everything?
Tellinger's got this idea about councils of elders, so each community would have a council of wise folks who would kind of guide things.
Councils of elders. Sounds a little like something out of Game of Thrones.
Right. But the idea is that these elders would be respected members of the community, chosen for their wisdom and experience. They'd help make decisions about resources and stuff like that.
Okay, so it's not just a total free-for-all. There's still some structure. But what about work? Do people just do whatever they want?
Kinda, but it's more about finding your labor of love. The idea is that you'd contribute your skills and passions to the community, doing what you love and helping others at the same time.
That sounds pretty idyllic. But what's stopping people from just being lazy? If there's no money, no incentive to work, why would anyone do anything?
That's a valid question. And Tellinger admits it's one of the challenges. But he believes that when you create a strong sense of community, people are more likely to want to contribute. It's about recognizing that everyone's well-being is interconnected.
So it's like a shift in mindset from me to we.
Exactly. It's about understanding that we all benefit when everyone contributes their talents and works together. And Tellinger believes that humans are naturally inclined to do this anyway.
Okay, so we've got these councils making decisions and people doing their labor of love. But how would communities interact with each other? Like, what about trade? Would they just give each other stuff for free?
Basically, Tellinger envisions a system of barter and collaboration between communities. Like if one community has a surplus of food and another needs tools, they just trade. You know? It's about meeting each other's needs, not about making a profit.
So it's all about cooperation and sharing. Sounds kind of hippy-dippy, but I kind of like it.
It is a pretty radical departure from our current system. But it's interesting to think about. And what about travel? Would people be stuck in their own communities?
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. Could you just pack up and go wherever you wanted?
Tellinger says yes. He believes people should be free to move between communities as they please. No borders, no restrictions. It's all about freedom and flexibility.
Wow, that's pretty wild. But how would you support yourself in a new community? Wouldn't you need some kind of resources or skills to offer?
Sure, you'd need to be able to contribute in some way. But the idea is that communities would welcome newcomers and help them find ways to integrate. It's about mutual support and understanding.
Okay, so we've talked about work and community. But what about education and healthcare? How would those function in a moneyless society?
Well, Tellinger has some pretty strong opinions about the current education system. He thinks it's too focused on rote learning and standardized tests, not enough on creativity and critical thinking.
He sounds like a lot of parents I know.
Yeah, maybe. But he envisions a much more holistic approach to education, one that encourages kids to discover their passions and learn through hands-on experience. He wants education to be about empowering individuals, not just preparing them for the workforce.
So it's about learning for the sake of learning, not just for a paycheck.
Oh.
Like that.
Yeah.
But what about healthcare? Would everyone just get free healthcare?
Tellinger's a big proponent of natural and holistic healthcare. He believes that many illnesses can be prevented or treated through lifestyle changes and natural remedies. He's pretty critical of the pharmaceutical industry.
Okay, so lots of prevention. But what about serious illnesses or emergencies? Would there be hospitals and doctors as we know them?
Tellinger believes that communities would have their own skilled healers who could provide both traditional and alternative care. It's about integrating healthcare into the fabric of daily life.
So it's more of a community-based approach to health and well-being.
Exactly. He sees it as a more humane and sustainable way to care for each other.
Okay, so we've got education, healthcare, community, All pretty utopian so far. But I have to ask, who takes care of the less glamorous jobs? Like, who builds the houses, maintains the infrastructure, grows the food? Those aren't exactly labor of love for everyone.
That's where the idea of shared responsibility comes in. Tellinger believes that everyone in the community would contribute to these essential tasks. It's about recognizing that even the less glamorous jobs are vital for the well-being of the whole.
So it's about everyone pitching in and doing their part, even if it's not always fun and exciting.
Exactly. It's about shifting our mindset from what's in it for me to what can I do to help.
I can see how that would create a much stronger sense of community. But wouldn't this system stifle innovation? I mean, if there's no profit motive, wouldn't people just stop inventing new things?
Tellinger actually believes the opposite. He thinks that a moneyless society would free us from the constraints of profit-driven innovation. Like, instead of focusing on what will make the most money, we could focus on what will truly benefit humanity.
That's a pretty radical idea.
Yeah.
So he's saying that a moneyless society would actually lead to more innovation, not less.
That's his argument. He thinks it would unleash a wave of creativity and collaboration as people are free to pursue their passions and share their ideas without worrying about patents or profits.
Okay, so we've explored this whole Ubuntu contributionism thing. It sounds pretty amazing, but also pretty unrealistic. Like, how would we ever transition from our current system to something so radically different?
Tellinger knows it wouldn't be easy. He talks about a gradual process, starting with small-scale community initiatives. Like, think community gardens, local bartering networks, things like that. The idea is to build alternative systems from the ground up and gradually create a parallel society that operates outside the traditional monetary system.
So it's like building a new world within the shell of the old one.
Exactly. It's a long-term vision, and it would require a massive shift in consciousness. But Tellinger believes it's possible.
Well, it's certainly a bold vision,
Yeah.
and whether it's achievable or not, it definitely makes you think about the possibilities. But even if we accept this whole Ubuntu contributionism thing, there are still a lot of practical questions, right? Like, how do you prevent corruption? What about people who just refuse to contribute? And how do you ensure that everyone has equal access to resources and opportunities?
Yeah, those are all valid concerns. And even among people who support Tellinger's ideas, there's a lot of debate about how these things would work in practice. And of course, his critics argue that the whole thing is just a utopian fantasy, completely impractical and unrealistic.
It's definitely a lot to unpack. But I have to say, it's refreshing to hear someone challenge the status quo so boldly. Tellinger's vision might seem radical, but it forces us to think outside the box and consider alternative ways of organizing society.
I agree. Whether you agree with all of his conclusions or not, his work is incredibly thought-provoking. He forces us to confront some fundamental questions about money, power, and the purpose of human society.
It's like he's holding up a mirror to our current system and saying, is this really the best we can do?
Exactly. And even if Ubuntu contributionism never becomes a reality, the very act of imagining such a radically different world can spark new ideas and inspire us to work towards a more just and equitable future.
So we've explored this utopian vision, but Tellinger also dives into some pretty controversial topics, like suppressed technologies. And that's where things get really interesting. All right, so we've talked about this whole new society and stuff, but Tellinger also gets into some pretty wild stuff about suppressed technologies, like cures for cancer, free energy, things like that. It's like straight out of a sci-fi movie.
Yeah, he definitely goes there. He believes there are all these groundbreaking inventions that already exist, but they're being hidden from us by powerful forces, you know?
Hidden by who? Like some secret cabal of evil geniuses.
He doesn't name names, but he suggests it's a combination of governments, corporations, you know, the usual suspects, people who benefit from the status quo and don't want to see things change.
Okay, so what kind of technologies are we talking about? Give me some examples.
Well, one of the most fascinating is the work of Royal Rife. He was this brilliant scientist back in the 1930s who claimed to have developed a cure for cancer using resonant frequency technology. Basically, he built this machine that could destroy cancer cells without harming healthy tissue.
Cure for cancer, that's huge. So what happened? Why isn't everyone using this technology?
Well, that's where the conspiracy comes in. Tellinger argues that Rife's work was intentionally suppressed by the medical establishment. They saw it as a threat to their profits, and they did everything they could to discredit him.
That's a pretty heavy accusation. Is there any evidence to support that?
It's hard to say for sure. Rife's work was definitely controversial, and there's no doubt that he faced opposition from powerful interests. But whether there was a deliberate conspiracy to silence him is a matter of debate.
So it's one of those things where you kind of have to make up your own mind based on the evidence.
Exactly. There's a lot of information out there, and it's important to be critical and do your own research, but Tellinger presents a compelling case.
Okay, so cancer cures. What else? He also talks about free energy, right?
Oh, yeah, he goes deep on that one.
Right.
He believes there are technologies that could provide us with unlimited clean energy, but they're being suppressed by the fossil fuel industry. They want to maintain their control over the energy sector and keep us dependent on oil and gas.
But wouldn't it make more sense for those companies to just buy up these technologies and profit from them? Why suppress them when you could just monopolize them?
That's a good question, and it's one of the main arguments against these suppressed technology theories. But Tellinger believes that the powers that be are more interested in control than profit. They want to keep us hooked on a system that benefits them, and free energy would disrupt that system.
I see. So basically he's saying that they're willing to sacrifice short-term profits for long-term power.
That's his argument.
Yeah.
He believes they're playing the long game.
It's a lot to wrap your head around, all these conspiracies and hidden agendas. But even if we take all that with a grain of salt, I think there's something to be said for Tellinger's overall message. He's really challenging us to think critically about the world around us and to question the narratives that we've been given.
I agree. He's like shaking us awake, forcing us to look beyond the surface and ask some tough questions.
And even if we don't agree with all his conclusions, he's definitely raising some important issues, like the role of money in society, the power of technology, the importance of community. These are things we should all be thinking about.
Absolutely. Whether you're a hardcore conspiracy theorist or a skeptical pragmatist, there's something valuable in Tellinger's work. He's pushing us to expand our minds and consider new possibilities, and I think that's always a good thing.
Well said. So for our listener out there who requested this deep dive on Ubuntu Contributionism, we hope you found it insightful. It's a complex and controversial topic, but it's definitely worth exploring.
And remember, this is just a starting point. There's so much more to learn and discover, so keep questioning, keep researching, and keep diving deep into the things that fascinate you.
And that's a wrap for this episode of The Deep Dive. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time for another deep dive into the unknown.